Hello and welcome to the JSA Studio. I am your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with the next video in our Big Ten team-by-team season in review series. Today, we're going to be talking about our first bowl-eligible team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. But before we get into the video proper, I am at this point going to ask you to like, comment, and subscribe, especially if you are a Nebraska fan. We talk about every single Big Ten team every week here during the season. And now, with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to do, and that is to get started by starting with Nebraska's season in review. And to start off that review, let's go ahead and talk about each game before we get into the big picture type stuff. You open the year with three pretty easy wins against UTEP, a rivalry game against Colorado, and against Northern Iowa. Going backwards a week to that rivalry game against Colorado, Colorado ended the year 9-3 competing in the Big 12. And you guys went 6-6 in the Big Ten. So that tells you, I think, quite a bit about the quality of those two conferences. Nevertheless, that was a big win. I do think Colorado is a good football team. They have a quarterback that is almost certainly going to get taken in the first round, as well as the best player in the country in Travis Hunter. So, yes, that was a quality win. End up being ranked against Northern Iowa, win that game, and you head into a ranked matchup Friday night game, Nebraska versus Illinois. And this is the game, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Dylan Raiola missed a wide open touchdown, or at least a surefire touchdown. Maybe it wasn't wide open, but a surefire touchdown that almost certainly would have won you that game and kept Illinois from getting to that 10-win mark. But also, losing in overtime to a 10-win football team, it's not necessarily a bad look, especially given what this year was meant to be for this team. You handled business against Purdue, handled business against Rutgers, which is actually a quality win. Rutgers was a good football team last year. You got dismantled by Indiana, doesn't mean a whole lot. You held your own against Ohio State. You really pushed that team, but when it came down to it, just didn't have enough in the tank there. The loss to UCLA, that one's the hardest one to swallow. Now, you could have beaten Illinois. Maybe you could make the argument you should have beaten Illinois, but you really should have beaten UCLA, okay, especially at home. I get maybe you were hung over a little bit from the last week. That was a tough, hard-fought game, but I don't think there's a lot of excuses there. I also think USC was also a winnable football game for you guys as well. However, that one I'm more forgiving on. I do think USC was better than their record last year, which we'll actually talk about that on Friday. But nevertheless, that was, I also think, a winnable game. Didn't go your way. That's okay. Not every game goes that way. You dismantled, honestly, Wisconsin and to get to bowl eligibility, and you lost a close game against Iowa. Okay. And then obviously you went on to win against Boston College in the bowl game. Thank you for helping out the Big Ten's overall record. But if we go back here and we look at this, Dylan Raiola hits that pass against Illinois. All of a sudden, that 7-6 becomes 8-5. You handle business against UCLA like you should. All of a sudden, that's 9-4. And you could have easily beaten Iowa as well. You know, you get a break here or there, a penalty here or there to get in the field goal range. Who knows what can happen in that game? You're not that far off from being, honestly, in a 10-win type of situation, which, you know, if you're 9-3 in the regular season in the Big Ten, you got a pretty decent chance to maybe sneak in to the playoff, unless they do that whole bullshit 4 teams from the Big Ten get guaranteed bid, 4 from the SEC, and then 2 from the other conferences. Yeah, I'm not on board with that, but they might do it. I wasn't on board with the expansion to 12 teams either. It is what it is. I don't care that much right now. But if you can get to 10 wins, you should be in the playoff, period. Okay. And as I'm going to talk about in the looking forward section of this video here, the difficulty next year is not as high as it is this year, in my opinion. But that's enough about that. What was the expectation heading into this year? The expectation was, hey, make a bowl game. Get to 6 wins. If you win the bowl game, you're over 500. Cool. And that's exactly what you did. You met expectations this year. Now, I would have liked to have seen more, or at least maybe more consistency out of Dylan Raiola. I think the talent is evident with the arm talent and the ability to move and do things like that. I think the talent is obvious, and you would have to be blind not to notice that. However, there was a lot less flashes this year than I anticipated. I think part of that is the talent of the roster that was around him. I think part of that was the scheme, neither of which was addressed all that much this offseason, but, that I guess doesn't matter. The point of this year was not about winning. If you had gone 3-9 again, I wouldn't have cared. The point of this year was allowing Dylan Raiola to see defenses in live reps, to get hit, to understand what is happening in the actual game of college football. And he did that this year. And he did it pretty good, too. There's a very solid chance, if he takes that next step forward, that this could be a really, really good team next year. All that being said, my grade for this team this year, even though they were closer in a lot of games than they have been in the past, they did also get blown out a couple of times, okay? But this is a team that is undoubtedly on the upward direction. But my grade for this year, this team, is a C+. You met expectations, maybe even exceeded it a little bit. So I'm giving you a C+. If you had just met my expectations, you'd probably be like a C. But you're a C+. You absolutely, I think, surpassed my expectations. You can sit here and argue for a B- if you want to. If you had managed to win one more game, I think you skip B- entirely and you just go to B. I think getting that W against, Illinois or Iowa or UCLA or USC, all of which I think were winnable games, really could have gone a long way in my confidence in this team. But as has been the case across regimes for pretty much my entire life now, you do kind of struggle in close games. And I think it is getting better under Matt Rule, but we got to see you win a big game here before I'm really going to start investing and believing in this program. Moving on to next year, this schedule, in my opinion, is a lot more manageable than it was this past season. Mainly because the Big Ten has absolutely nailed how to do scheduling, okay? Like, Florida got bent over a table by the SEC. Well, Alabama's got a pretty easy path. Texas had an incredibly easy path this past season when Florida, Ole Miss, and Georgia got bent over the table by the SEC. They do a very poor job with scheduling in terms of getting teams into the playoffs, in my opinion. But the Big Ten has honestly done a pretty good job of letting their big names have winnable and navigatable schedules. You guys open up against Cincinnati. That is an interesting game. Cincinnati, a very, very good group of 5 team that got elevated to the Big 12. They were decent last year. I do believe in that program. I do believe that Cincinnati, will end up being a consistent Power 4 quality program, but they're still probably another year away. That's a game you should win. It's neutral site. You're at Arrowhead in that game. You should beat Akron at home and Houston Christian, obviously. First big test at home, probably a night game if I had to guess, versus Michigan. Now, I'm a Michigan fan. I think Michigan's going to be good next year. I don't know if they're going to be really good or just kind of good, but I think they're going to be good next year, okay? This is absolutely a game Nebraska can win. You can absolutely beat Michigan. Unless Bryce Underwood comes out and he's Trevor Lawrence when he stepped in during, I think it was the 5th game his freshman year, and it was just like, oh yeah, this guy's the first pick of the draft in a few years. Unless Bryce Underwood is that, I don't think this is going to be an unbeatable team for you guys. All right. Michigan State, I don't know what Michigan State's going to look like. Very winnable game. Maryland, probably starting a true freshman quarterback. Very winnable game. Minnesota, that's a building program, and last year was kind of the year that they were building to. They got some tough breaks. Might be a little bit of a reset for Minnesota this year. Very winnable game. Northwestern, again, kind of year on, year off sort of situation. Very winnable game. UCLA, another winnable game, in my opinion. You're on the road this year. I don't think UCLA is going to improve all that dramatically. I think they're going to be better next year. I think they're going to be bowl contenders, potentially. But I'm not sure that they're going to take that step to be like a 7-8 win team, which I think you guys are going to take that step. That's a very winnable game. At Penn State, that's a tough game. That's the only game where I look at this and I say, probably not. And then at home on a Friday to end the year with Iowa, it's become kind of a rivalry game now. That is another game where I don't really know what Iowa's going to look like. I think they're probably going to be solid like they always are. Not an unwinnable game. There is a scenario, a very real scenario, where you could be 11-1. And depending upon how much Dylan Raiola takes that next step forward, maybe 12-0. Genuinely. I don't think that's hyperbole. Now, is that just talk right now? Yes. I don't know what this team can be next year. I haven't even really looked at the roster that and the changes that you made, potential young guys that could step up, transfer portal players. I haven't really looked at any of that yet. I'll do that when I do my previews in the summer, okay? But right now, I think you should probably head into there thinking 10 wins is a real possibility. Because, like, let's say you lose your 2 toughest games, Michigan and UCLA. What's your next toughest game? Iowa? That's not unwinnable. You're at home. After that, UCLA on the road? I don't know. Minnesota could be all right on the road as well. Probably should beat Maryland. Probably should beat Michigan State. This is a team where the schedule has kind of fallen in your lap to maybe end up 10-2 and being a real sneaky contender for the playoff next year. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. To this point, I'd like to ask you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.